Hello, Symposiast. I'm Dr. Angela Puca, Religious Studies PhD and University Lecturer, and this is your online resource for the academic study of Magic, esotericism, paganism, shamanism, and all things occult. As you may know, as a part of my project on Angela's Symposium, besides delivering scholarly material on all things on esotericism, is also to bridge the gap between the community of practitioners and the scholarly community. Besides, I'm an anthropologist of religion, so it is also something that I do in my academic line of work. And it is my absolute pleasure to be today in conversation with a special guest that I'm now bringing on, Ivy. Hello,
Hello.
Ivy.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on the channel. It's truly an honor to be here. I've watched quite a few of your videos. I think I've watched your channel since its creation. So
Oh,
it is,
really?
yeah, I think I was like one of your first subscribers, but I really, really enjoy some of the content you put out. And I'm excited to have a conversation today. I'm really excited we get to do this double collaboration. And yeah, so thanks for having me on.
Yes, I will have I will be also interviewed by Ivy on her channel, so don't forget to check out her channel as well and subscribe to it if you haven't already. Yeah, I also watch your videos and I find them very interesting, hence why this conversation is happening. So, can you give us a little bit of a background on yourself? You know, something about yourself. Who are you, and what is your project about on social media and in life?
In life, oh my gosh. No, I hate this
That's too much.
question because because what haven't I done, you know? I think people think that I'm younger than I actually am. So I've been practicing magic for probably 20 years at this point, maybe 22, something of that nature. But I started really young. So I had a grandma who was a Rosicrucian, and then my other grandma was a psychic, although technically it can be called second sight, which kind of led to my gifts as a young child, having visions and working with spirits. And I personally prefer the term seer because the type of visions I receive are of pertaining to the future in regards to life and death. And I can totally go into that a little bit more if you want, but I want to try to stick to the bullet points for your question. So I practiced witchcraft from a pretty young age at, around 13, started dabbling into that kind of stuff. Late teenage years, I really got into ceremonial magic by way of the Golden Dawn. So I was working through the self-initiation curriculum, 16, 17, 18 years old. And, but I was an atheist at the time. And so I found myself having a really, really hard time believing in the validity of what I was doing. I was not able to experience the things in these rituals that other practitioners online claimed that they experienced. And I think that it was because of my belief so rigidly, what is the word I'm looking for here? Dogmatically in atheism is the word that I'm looking for. So from there, I kind of went into a hardcore atheist phase for a while. And I had a science phase as well. I was a Zen Buddhist for many years. I actually had a mentor who was a family friend, and he was an ex-Tibetan monk. So he was in Tibet in the monastery for 7 years, decided that he didn't want to be there for life. So he came back home to the United States, and I met him through my family, and he became my mentor. So during that period of my life in my 20s, I learned a lot about brainwave states and meditation and trance work. And he was also really unorthodox. So we did some crazy stuff. I mean, we did some crazy mind palace work, and it really expanded my mind in ways that no other practice has. So I ultimately left the concept of Zen Buddhism because I did have my gripes with certain things, and kind of easily fell back into witchcraft and shamanic practices. And I've had a lot of indigenous friends as well that have brought me into their various cultures and shown me the type of magic that they do. And so that's kind of how I got into more shamanic styles of practice, which I don't really talk about online because that is their practice. It's not mine. It's not mine to teach. I was brought in as a guest, so I'm not here to teach people about the things that I learned in those scenarios. But I will say that going on shamanic journeys and such really furthered my understanding of meditation and brainwaves and how we can understand just ritual in general. But yeah, I would say I found chaos magic in the last 5-6 years or so, and that's really where I feel like it fit me best because of this freedom and working with the idea of primordial chaos and this avoidance of dogmatism, where you can kind of just go off and play and explore and be curious. I often say on my channel that I really like to embody Alice from Alice in Wonderland. So anytime I go on a meditation journey, I often embody Alice because she represents this innocence, this curiosity, this wonder, going into this wonderland of all these different things that she doesn't understand. So I really like having that perspective going into my magical practice rather than going in with ego. Because I think a lot of people go in with ego where they want to dominate, they want power, they want to manipulate a spirit into doing their bidding, and no judgments whatsoever. People can do whatever they want in their own magical practices, but I try to approach it as I am a small creature in the macro, and I try to embody that curiosity of Alice. So yeah, I think that kind of. Oh, I'm also a medical intuitive. So I worked. I was a healthcare practitioner for about 10 years before recently changing my career. And so I was a medical intuitive during that time, where doctors would always kind of jokingly give me the worst and most difficult cases of patients, because they would say, oh, Ivy will figure it out. Ivy's the one that will figure out this really, really weird case. So I would get the odd ones to kind of have to decipher what was going on with the patient. And most times it was just that the doctors weren't listening to the patient. But I did use my medical intuition skills there. And yeah, and since then, just been kind of honing in my seer abilities and getting more comfortable talking about that in a public space. It's not something that I ever wanted to really talk about previously, because it felt very performative. And I don't want to just come on a platform and say, oh, I have all these psychic abilities. Look at me, I'm so special. Because I do believe that we all can sharpen these skills over time, and that I am not special. I want to be very clear about that. So yeah, what haven't I done? I don't know. I think I covered it all. That's kind of my origin story. So I guess I'll go from there.
What did you do in healthcare? Was it?
Yeah. I was a medical massage therapist, was my technical license. I worked in musculoskeletal medicine, so I worked alongside physiatrists and physical therapists. But I was also going to school to be a physical therapist before I realized that I actually hate the real job of being a physical therapist. So I decided not to do that. But then I also got a certificate in nutrition from the National Academy of Sports Medicine, just to kind of further be able to talk to the patients that I was working with about nutrition. I did a lot of continuing education about the gut-brain axis. And it's something that I'm really passionate about. That axis, it controls so much. So I could go on and on about that. But, and then I went to school thinking I was going to become a psychologist. I got through all the way, year 3 in my psychology degree, decided I don't want to be a psychologist either. So I ditched that, switched over to molecular biosciences, got my science degree, and now I work in a laboratory. So I've just been that kind of person that's curious, and I've never been able to really pinpoint what it is that I want to do in life. I've kind of been all over the place, but it's always surrounded the themes of the mind, body, and spirit, and its convergence and energy flowing through the body. And those things have always fascinated me. So yeah, not to be long-winded with your short question, but yeah.
You can be as long-winded as you want.
Great.
What is it about chaos magic that has, other than the lack of dogmatism, that really resonated with you compared to other things like Zen Buddhism? Because I also come from having studied Buddhism. I mean, originally I was going to become a Buddhist scholar, so I also
Wow.
learned Sanskrit and Tibetan in my academic life. So Buddhism is also one thing that has always interested me, especially the philosophy of Buddhism. I think it's quite fascinating. Obviously, there are different traditions and they have different practices and philosophies. But what is it about chaos magic that resonates more with you compared to the other practices that you have entertained?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's many different branches of Buddhism, right? You already know this. And Zen Buddhism in particular, I would say, is less dogmatic than some other branches of Buddhism. It is a little bit less traditional, especially working through my mentor, who is already unorthodox as it is. It was a very interesting experience, but I think it was still a little bit too dogmatic for me, because there's still perceptions on how one should live their life, thoughts on the afterlife and reincarnation and enlightenment and things of that nature. And I could never fully subscribe to any form of dogma whatsoever. And I think that's really what drew me to chaos magic, because we don't know what we don't know, and we're never going to have the answers. And so I see all these debates online all the time about, well, how does magic work? Is the spirit model the true way? Is the energy model the true way? Is it the psych model? Is it all of them? It's the meta model? Who cares? From a practitioner perspective, or at least from my perspective, who cares at the end of the day how magic works, what the big picture is? If we were meant to know, then I think that we would know, but our brains are too small in order to comprehend such a complex thing. So I think for me, just kind of going away from all dogma and really deconditioning my mind, shedding limiting beliefs, including societal brainwashing, perhaps, or any sort of conditioning from your childhood. It really stripped back layers of my ego to where I could get back to the core of who I am and this primordial chaos within myself, if that makes sense. I know that chaos magic's very much about primordial chaos, but I found in this process of deconditioning my mind and paradigm shifting frequently, I was able to find that primordial piece within myself. And that sort of, I know this is really interesting to say, and maybe chaos magicians are going to be really mad that I say this, but I know that chaos magic rejects dogma in the sense of, it kind of looks at ceremonial magic and scoffs, right? We don't need this union with the divine. We don't need to be chanting all these things. But it's funny that in the process with chaos magic, with deconditioning my mind, shedding these limiting beliefs, going through this paradigm shifting, that's where I found my connection to the divine. And I know that's very anti-chaos magic for me to say because I'm inserting some of my own personal dogma here, but that's where I found the true spark of the primordial and me connecting myself, microcosm to macrocosm, to something much bigger. So I don't even remember what the original question was. You're going to have to remind me frequently. I told Dr. Puka offline, I don't normally get interviewed. I'm usually the interviewer. So, you'll have to rein me in if I get too long-winded.
No, that's fine. You're doing great. Don't worry.
Fantastic.
I suppose that, to your question about why does it matter, what model is the true one? I suppose if we want to address that question from a non-dogmatic standpoint, because obviously somebody who's dogmatic and cares about the ontology of it and says, I want to know which one is the true one, which one is real. So even if we, for a moment, sort of park that idea, one of the reasons I think that practitioners are interested in the kind of question is because if they feel that if they understand the reason why it works, then they have more freedom in molding their practice. Because when you don't have a theoretical foundation, then people might feel like, then I just have to do the ritual by the letter. I don't have any leeway or freedom to change it in one way or another because I don't have any background understanding of what the principles for it working are. So I suppose that would be a practical reason to, but
Sure.
yeah,
I
but I
would love to
suppose that
speak on
again.
that. Yeah, no, because it's so true. We love to categorize things. Humans love to categorize things. And it's also sometimes a fear response as well, because we fear the unknown, right? So if there's something that we don't fully understand, we try to categorize it in our mind to then be able to better understand it and alleviate that fear. But when it comes to the unknown and these things that we're never going to have the answer to, I think there is, I wish that there was a little bit more open-mindedness in the community to the fact that we may potentially all be wrong. Something that really does frustrate me, if I can bring this up in our conversation, is that I see many people online claiming that their truth is the one truth. And this is something that I wish that we could have more discourse on. There's this old fable. It's called The Blind Man and the Elephant. Have you ever heard of that fable, The Blind Man and the Elephant?
No, I don't think so.
I'll just summarize it really briefly. And please, anybody listening to this, go off and actually read the fable, because I'm not gonna do it justice right now because I don't have it in front of my face. But these blind men approach the elephant and they're touching various parts of the elephant. They can't see the elephant, right? So they're just touching it. And each man is touching a different part and interpreting the elephant differently. They're claiming it's like a whip or whatever. I can't remember the actual words that are in this fable. But the fact of the matter is that none of them can actually see the entire entirety of the elephant. So they're all just kind of bumbling around blind, trying to interpret this thing. And they all are arguing amongst each other over whether the tail is a whip or the ear is a fan or whatever it is. But really, we can't see the entire elephant. So yeah, that's something that really frustrates me quite a bit, is when people try to pass off their personal gnosis as fact or as the ultimate truth that everyone must believe. So I always try to preface in all of my YouTube videos, this is my experience, okay? Take it with a grain of salt. Please use critical thinking skills and do not believe everything that even I say. I think it's important to put that up to what you personally believe and see if it works and see if it doesn't. So just had to go on that little rant to respond to what you said.
I agree with you. And we talked before starting the recording about how much I also hate dogmatism. And the fact that I find that as a scholar is somewhat liberating, the fact that I suppose it seems to me like very often practitioners get really attached to a certain truth that they put forward, and even when they are faced with the evidence that that is not correct, they will still do all sorts of mental gymnastics to still holding on to that thing that they believe is the truth. And I find it very liberating, the fact that as an academic and in academia, we have the idea, we don't think about discovering the truth, we think about discovering the most accurate knowledge that we can at any given time, given the limitations that we all have. So given that we have the idea that knowledge is a moving target, it is not a problem at all if you're faced with evidence that suggests that your findings were not correct or need to be revised. For us, it's fine. It's like, okay, I'll write another paper to revise my previous findings. It's not a big drama or something that people feel like affects their own identity. If anything, our identity is about trying to discover more, to approximate more and more to the most accurate knowledge that we can get. Whereas there are some practitioners, in my view, that just don't accept that. I mean, I've seen a lot of Wiccans that still now, after decades, that the whole theory that Wicca is the oldest religion in the world, they still claim that that's it, that Wicca is the oldest religion. So that, to me, it's a bit surprising, even shocking sometimes, because it's like we have like plenty of studies at this point. Obviously, Ronald Hutton has been a big proponent of the history behind Wicca, but you will still find, especially in the US, people that are, in very well-known Wiccans that claim that, and I find it surprising.
That is really surprising. Yeah, well, it's the exact same. How it is in academia is the exact same in scientific fields. Like, if you are a true scientist, you acknowledge that things are changing all the time. There are new discoveries. We once thought that the Earth was flat, so I see the parallels there to what you're talking about, just in, my own, I don't like to call myself a scientist because that's not my technical title in the laboratory I work in. So scientist is a different job with a different degree, is what I like to explain. But, and I try to keep my job pretty vague just for safety reasons on the internet, but it's the same exact thing. It is really frustrating when we live in this age of scientism, is what I've been calling it, because we are obsessed with science. We're obsessed with explaining away magic, the paranormal, anything of that nature by science. And I actually really appreciated, you did a recent video on that where you had mentioned science. I can't remember the title, Science Can't Explain Magic or something like that.
Yes, can prove
But yeah,
magic or something.
yeah, I really appreciated that video, because when I first started my science degree, I really wanted to find the convergence between spirituality and the paranormal and psychology and biology. That was really, really where I wanted to study further. And then the further I got in my magical practice and the further I got in my science degree and actually working in a scientific, a job right now, I think it's actually a disservice to try to explain magic through science. And I'm starting to shift my perspective a little bit on that. I thought that was going to be my lifelong goal. And I'm not saying that my mind could change tomorrow. I'm a very fluid person. So maybe tomorrow I feel differently, but today in this moment, I agree with that video. I don't think that science can explain magic, nor do I want it to. And I think that in the age of scientism, we get obsessed with categorizing things, trying to explain things by science. If it gives it more validity, then somehow that makes it more meaningful. And that's frustrating because when you're practicing magic, for me, it's a spiritual and emotional experience. It is not quantifiable through scientific means. So yeah, no, I really loved that video, and I'm happy that you put that out. I've been wanting to put out something very similar, but maybe I'll wait a couple months so it doesn't look like I'm just piggybacking off what you just put out.
Well, I mean, feel free to, to refer to my video as well. I mean,
Sure.
and I'm sure that you have a lot to contribute to the discourse as well. But yeah, personally, I think that I understand why practitioners want the scientific validation. I completely understand it, because I suppose the monotheistic religions don't feel the need to have that sort of validation because they are already validated by society, and
Mhm.
practitioners are not. In a way, they are rejected by society. So, there are even people that might think, oh, if you believe in magic, then you're mad or something. So, it's not congruent with our current dominant framework. So
Mm.
I understand why they want to fit the mold and say, look, there is scientific proof. So you cannot say that I'm mad. You cannot say that I'm completely out there. There is actual proof. So I understand the need for it, but that need is misplaced. And the only thing that science can do is actually to flatten magic and esotericism, because the only way, well, I still think that it's not possible to prove it, but the only way to go about proving it, it would be to only look at the physical side or the physical manifestations of magic, because there are so many aspects, holistic aspects of magic that are not physical, are not material,
Mhm.
but
Mm.
they still play a role. I mean, for instance, if I'm a woman and I have a cycle that aligns with the moon, and at this a certain specific full moons, I will have a different effect compared to when it's not a full moon. How do you account for that? How do you account for, the feeling, the intuitions? It's just not something that science was not made for, that kind of inquiry. That's it. I think that because science is so useful and incredibly precious, because it really allowed us to move forward so much in so many areas of our lives, because it is so good at understanding the physical world, then people
Mm.
assume, oh, then it must be good to understand everything. Then no, I think we need to be to stop the laziness and think that I think that's another pet peeve of mine, that often people, when there is something that works really well, they want it to work well for everything. Like
Yes.
that there is everybody wants to find the one key that has the answer and explanations and work for everything and anything. And I think that that's not how reality works. I think that reality is very multifaceted, and there will be methodologies that will be incredibly effective to inquire over certain things, and incredibly ineffective and incompetent at analyzing other aspects of reality. So
Yeah. Well, you brought up a really good point about like monotheistic religions and faith. There's a lot of faith involved in believing in your God, praying to your God, attending church every Sunday. Why are we not focusing more on that faith and belief in our own magical practices? Why do we feel this constant need to try to explain it away by science in order to somehow validate what we're doing in our practices? Isn't faith enough? Isn't belief enough? And that's something that really drew me to chaos magic, because it's very dependent on your belief. You are using your belief as a tool to manipulate your reality and create the life that you want for yourself. And I thought that was so beautiful to use your belief in that way. So I don't know. I think what you said is true. I think because we are persecuted, and unfortunately it is not safe for a lot of practitioners to be out publicly and to practice these types of things, that people feel the need to explain their magical practices by science, or, like quantum physics or energy work and all of those sorts of things, to try to explain to their mom, to their dad, to their sister who doesn't understand what they're doing, to prove that it's not evil or bad or whatever, and that we don't need to be persecuted. So I get it. I really do get it. But sometimes I just wish that we could just have a little bit more faith and belief in the practices that we're experiencing. It also kind of reminds me of the field of psychology too, because I did a whole class on the DSM-5, which is like the diagnostic handbook. You know, when you are diagnosing somebody with some sort of mental disturbance, you would use the DSM-5. That is the most updated handbook that kind of goes over mental disorders. And that's updating all the time. And even psychology, I don't even know if I would, this is going to be so controversial to say, I don't even know if I would consider psychology a full science. For me, it's a little bit of an art because you're dealing with emotions, which are really, really difficult to quantify. And that's how I feel about magic, because you're experiencing it spiritually, you're experiencing it emotionally. And how do you quantify these things in a scientific way? Even in the diagnostic criteria that we have for the psychology world, that changes all the time. We had a DSM-4, then we have a DSM-5, and it's constantly evolving with the way that we categorize mental health concerns and you know, the parameters of what someone needs to meet in order to be diagnosed with this specific condition. So it's not this cut and dry hard science. And so I do kind of place psychology in this convergence of art and science together. I feel like I'm going to get hate for that, but I don't care. It's my opinion. And so bringing us all the way back full circle to faith and belief and experiencing things spiritually and emotionally, I just don't feel the need to explain it by science anymore, I guess is the point I was getting at.
Yeah, I suppose that another clarification that I have to make is that when I was talking about science, I was talking about the natural science that uses quantitative analysis mostly. So I would say that in my view, psychology is more in the field of social science.
Yes.
I mean, there is because even though I said, you know, science cannot prove magic, and by that I mean with the quantitative methods of natural science, but obviously there is a space for academia, which also includes science, to study magic and esotericism in a qualitative way. And that happens with social sciences, anthropology, history of religion, religious studies. So there are fields that do study magical practices and esotericism, but it's not the point of them is not to prove their existence or their validity. It's more about studying the development of certain practices, the way that practitioners attribute meaning to them, how they developed, how they are practiced. Like in anthropology, what I do is pretty much to understand the practices, to understand what people do. And I'm there and I undertake initiations, rituals, and so on, so that I understand what happens in the rituals. But even when I'm on the field as a researcher, I still have to deal with that desire for people for scientific validation, because they know that I'm an academic. And I've been in situations a few times actually where people, like the day after we did a ritual in the night and so on, they would say, "Oh, Angela, you're an academic now, you've seen what happened yesterday, can you say that it didn't happen?" And they kind of wanted my validation, like for me to say yes, it did happen, and that would be the stamp of science saying. So it's you know, it is something that I've come across, especially because I do work with people in my research. So, and you know, there's part of me that I really empathize with them. Even I, as a teenager, I insisted to explain to my parents that there was a basis to magic, and the colors were specific electromagnetic vibrations. So I think I resonate with what you said, saying that you came from a place where you thought that was your mission, and then you realized actually that's not possible. Because I think that's how I felt as a teenager. It's like, oh, I have to find the link between science and magic. I'm sure that it can be proven that. And then, as you said, exactly as you said, the more I became competent in academia, and you know, the more I understood practices and magic, the more I realized actually this is not happening.
Well, yeah, it's so true, because so this is how my brain works, and this is kind of how I see it. Science explains ordinary reality. Magic explains non-ordinary reality. And so I really do think it's a disservice to try to explain magic with science when they are two completely different realms. I know there are tons of people that would argue with me, go read such and such book that talks about quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and people will try to claim
pseudoscience. Yeah.
Right. It is pseudoscience at the end of the day. I think it's really interesting. Don't get me wrong. And I had a point in my practice as well where I was obsessed with quantum mechanics. And I really do understand the need or the want to try to explain things away. But it is a pseudoscience. And there's nothing wrong with entertaining those ideas for now, but it is not a hard science at this time. And I think that we do need to acknowledge that. But another thing I wanted to bring up too is that even if science explains ordinary reality and magic explains non-ordinary reality, I do think that some aspects of different sciences can help us explain and understand the ritual experience better to become better magicians. So for example, all of my education on brainwave states and meditation and such, and the academic papers that I have read about Tibetan monks meditating, reaching a gamma state, or people claiming that they're experiencing this Kundalini meditation, that can all help us better understand how to flow in ritual, how to descend into an alpha brainwave state or a theta brainwave state, how to talk to spirits and kind of step through that threshold between ordinary reality and non-ordinary reality. So I don't want to completely diminish science's impact, because I do think that it can help us better understand what we're doing and become better at performing magic and performing these rituals. It just doesn't need to be the end all be all, and we don't need to obsess over it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that science and even the work that I do is informing practitioners at the end of the day. I think that it's very useful, but it's one thing to see science as a tool for magic than seeing science as the validator of magic. It's a very different perspective. But yeah, I agree with you. It is the two are different fields that aim at different things. But another reason why I think practitioners like to entertain the scientific worldview is because I think that there is somewhat a scientific approach to magic. You were mentioning earlier about the fact that in monotheistic religions they rely a lot on faith and believing in things, and I think it's true that it has its own value, and perhaps there are some practitioners that feel a bit detached from that because they want to distance themselves from those religions that perhaps they grew up in. But one thing that perhaps I think distinguishes esoteric practitioners from the standard orthodox people that are within monotheistic religions is the fact that esoteric practitioners are very experience led. So they don't read a book and try to match everything they see to the book or to their belief. It seems to me like this can vary depending on the tradition, but it is still something that I see across the board, that for esoteric practitioners, what counts the most is what happens, is the practice. So it's very common for practitioners to have diaries to report their experiences, their rituals, what worked, what didn't work, so that they can get better at it and get better results. So I think that magic is more experience driven. And in that sense, there is something akin to the scientific, more than scientific, it would be probably more appropriate to call it empirical method. So there is an empirical method to science where people want to understand, okay, why this ritual was more effective than the other one. What is the different component, what is the different lunation or whatever it is. So there is a strong empirical component where there is also an element of trying to replicate and repeat. So there are parallels, but it is still not the same, because obviously the factors that are accounted for are things that wouldn't be accounted for in a scientific experiment. Like, for instance, I don't know, where you are in your cycle, where the moon is, and what kind of planetary hour you used for your magic, and all of those things. So there is an empirical, but rather than scientific, I would call it more empirical, that there is an empirical drive to magic practices for good reasons, because obviously people that practice magic want results.
Yeah, I think that's seen a lot in a chaos magic practice. There's actually kind of a misconception with chaos magic. People think it's just chaotic all over the place, and there's no discipline involved. And maybe that's the case for some, but there's actually a degree of technical excellence. So that term specifically comes from Phil Hine in his book Condensed Chaos. I think that one was written in 1995. But he identified 6 key principles for chaos magic. And then since then, we have lots of books that have talked about technical excellence, or this idea of note taking and being your own mad scientist is what I personally call it. I think it's very important to utilize critical thinking skills and everything that you explained, because especially when you're working with spirits, especially if you're working with ones that you don't know very well, you need to be able to take notes. You need to know what you're doing. You have to write down what worked, what didn't work. If I'm working with a new spirit for the first time and I don't know what they even like, I don't know who I'm talking to yet. I've encountered them in a new environment, and let's say I want to make a friend. I'm saying this in very simplistic terms, but let's say I want to give them an offering, but I don't know what they like. So I sit down and I do some divination with them, and I experiment by giving them different types of offerings. All of that stuff should be written down. And if you're doing rituals, especially from, if we're talking about like thaumaturgy, obviously, where you're really trying to manifest something into your material realm, you should write down what works and what doesn't. And at the end of the day, chaos magic really gets down to that exact principle: what works and what doesn't. It's very pragmatic. It's very streamlined. And in order to get down to the bottom line of what's going to work as quick as possible, you need to be taking good notes. Otherwise, you're completely wasting your time, in my opinion. So yeah, I can agree.
So based on your experience, could you draw what are the elements of a magical ritual or a general magic practice that makes it work?
Oh
So
my gosh.
is it the spirits? Is it specific ritualistic elements? So what do you think? What are the elements that, in your personal experience, make magic effective?
Nothing and anything is my immediate answer. No, it really just depends. Coming from a chaos magic perspective, it completely depends on the type of ritual. It depends on the tradition I'm operating from. It depends on the spirits that I'm working with. Or sometimes there will be rituals where I'm working more from the psychological model, or maybe I'm working with the energy model, or maybe I'm working with the spirit model. And all of those types of rituals are going to have very different components. The one thing that I will say that I utilize in every single ritual, and this is going to be so cliche and so lame of me to say, but it really is my mind in a meditative trance. That is all anyone ever needs, in my opinion. We don't need fancy tools. We don't need fancy invocations and evocations. I know I'm going to get a lot of heat for saying that too, but it is what it is. I truly think that if the magician is able to enter an altered state of consciousness, they are able to drop down and have easier access to their subconscious mind, and then also beyond the subconscious mind into the spirit world and such, and really kind of cross that threshold. So I don't think that the magician needs anything for ritual except for their mind and their ability to enter a trance state. However you need to do that. I mean, I did a 2-part series. It was like I did a video on meditation that was an hour to an hour and a half long. And then I also did a follow-up video on brainwave states, which I think is another 30 minutes to 45 minutes or something. And that's just scraping the surface. And there's so many different ways that we can do this too. I know that people have different concerns, like if you have ADHD or if you have aphantasia, these are the common concerns that I hear. So I try to address those in those videos as much as possible. You don't have to be just sitting down, spine straight, trying to think of nothing and emptying your brain space. There is so much more that you can do than that. But yeah, that's a hard question for me to answer, because again, it just depends on what kind of ritual I'm doing. But really, at the end of the day, it's you are the power. You are the replica of the macrocosm, because you are the microcosm. So I hope that answers your question. I don't know if it does fully, but
yeah, in part it does. So for instance, if you have to plan for a ritual, let's say you want to achieve something in your life, whether it's healing, a new job, or whatever it is, how do you go about planning, if you do it at all, or maybe you just enter into this meditative state and project an image? So how do you go about planning a ritual for different types of purposes?
Sure. Oh, well, I guess for my own magical practice, then I would say I really utilize planetary magic the most. So it really depends on, am I doing a banishing? Am I doing a healing ritual? So on and so forth. I will pick the planetary sphere that I'm wanting to work with, and then I will find an auspicious time where the planet is in a really good position according to planetary dignities, and then I'll look at a couple other factors as well to see where the planet is positioned in relation to other planets. Considering aspects and such. And then once I find the day that I want to perform the ritual on, and then I'll incorporate things such as the planetary hour, colors, incense. Maybe I want to work with the archangel of that particular planet. So for me, it really is planetary magic right now. That seems to be the most effective. And I know a lot of people are really try to shy away from astrology and planetary magic because it can seem so daunting at first. It's very heady. I feel like it's an intellectual practice sometimes, intellectual gymnastics. I don't know, to kind of go back to what we were saying earlier in this conversation, but I do think it's worth learning. I think that if I could press the importance on every occultist, please take the time to even just briefly look into planetary magic, because there is nothing that has been more effective in my magical practice than timing things auspiciously with where the planets are in the sky, and then working with those celestial spheres of influence and bringing down that celestial energy. So yeah, it depends on the purpose of the ritual, but I would say that's probably my normal ritual flow.
And how do you bring down the planetary energy influence, as you mentioned? Is it something
Yeah.
that you still do via meditations? Is
Mhm.
it via visualization during meditation? How does it work for you?
Sure. Well, again, it depends on the ritual. Completely depends on the ritual, because there may be times where I'm working with the archangel, and so I'm calling upon that archangel. Or there's times where I'm just working. This is a very chaos magic perspective, so traditional ceremonial magicians may not love what I'm going to say, but I do think that there are certain trance states that you can hit with these planetary spheres of intelligences just by. So I usually go through trance work of tree branching. I don't know if you've ever heard of this method, but it's where you envision these tree branches coming out of your crown, and then reaching up towards the celestial realm, and then you draw down the color that is associated with that planet. And there might be certain things that you say or that you hum. The most important part is to get into that altered state of consciousness. I particularly like working with colors, so I make sure that I am embodying that color as I am drawing it down in this trance state and allowing it to fill up my entire being. And it's a process of invocation, and you are assuming that energy. You're letting it fill up your being, and then you are acting accordingly. You're letting that energy channel through you as you perform the rest of your ritual, whether you're doing a candle working, or whatever it is practically that you're doing on the table in front of you, or maybe you're just building an altar and saying a prayer. So yeah, there's many different ways to do it. Some sort of path working or meditation or trance is always involved in it, though.
Hmm. And once you have done the process of invocation in the way that you described, what seals the deal? Like once you have brought it in, how do you finally project it so that it goes
Mm.
where you want it to go? And how do you make sure that it goes where you want to go as opposed to randomly?
Sure. Well, I mean, you're being hopefully you've thought this out in advance to where you have a protocol in your ritual, right? So you have a dismissal, you have a potential banishment if things go awry, which I've never really had to use, but it's always good to have it on hand. But you want to call this energy into your being, and it's a process of directing that through your. I mean, some people will do it through your hands, or through your heart center, or through your solar. Again, I'm talking about this from a very, very chaos magic perspective. I acknowledge that this is not part of traditional planetary magic, because there are certain things that you would have to read or say. But you could also utilize an Orphic hymn to the planet. You don't necessarily have to be invoking and embodying this energy in your being. If you prefer to create an altar to this planet, and then sit down and read an Orphic hymn, and then maybe provide some other offerings, you write down your petition of what you would like to happen, and then what you are hopefully willing to give give in return. So whether it's physical offerings or maybe it's acts of service is really my favorite. So it's kind of the way I like to give offerings to the spiritual entities that I work with. And then it's a little bit of bargain. You put in your petition, you ask for this thing to happen, you give something in return, and then you do a dismissal. And the dismissal completely depends on what spirits you're working with and which planetary intelligence you're working with, and so on and so forth. But so you dismiss that energy at the end, and hopefully you won't need to do a banishment because you've done everything correctly and you didn't invoke something you didn't want to invoke. And then that's it. Easy. Chaos magic is all about what works and what doesn't. So it's a very streamlined process for sure. There's no arduous ceremonies that take 2 hours to perform in anything that I'm doing.
What kind of acts of service do you think that the spirits you work with like?
Oh, that's a great question. So I will say, so I'm devoted to Thoth. I don't talk about it a lot because it's not something, I don't want to put myself in a position where I am educating people on something that I am currently still experiencing. I've been working with Thoth for about 3 years now. And I say Thoth, I know there's many different pronunciations, Thoth, there's tons of different pronunciations. Yeah. I say Thoth because in my meditations when I'm chanting, that's what feels best to my mouth. So, there's no right or wrong way I've heard to pronounce that name. But I will say that when I'm working with Thoth in particular, he really enjoys me writing. So he's actually one of the reasons why I was able to receive all the writing opportunities that I did. And so what I would do is I would sit down, and before I would go through a writing session of writing a chapter or writing my essay or whatever it was, I would actually write in something devotional to Thoth, and then I would quickly delete it and then continue on with my writing session. So I would quickly type in which I don't want to share my personal devotional things to him, but I would do this act of service of sitting down and writing or reading or doing anything mercurial really or lunar related. So yeah, I think and if we're talking about Mercury, really anything travel and writing and any sort of intellectual activities or consuming knowledge in any way is a great offering. So yeah, there's lots of different things that you can do. I think for offerings, we get so hung up on material possessions. Everybody wants to sit down and offer wine, whiskey, mead, all these things to the spirits, which is great for some spirits, I'm sure. But for me, I would rather work with spirits that want to see me do the things that they rule over, that they're getting satisfaction over me accomplishing things on their behalf in their name. And you'll actually see in my book that's coming out, I have the very first page, it literally says this book is dedicated to Thoth, and that's it. Thoth and Thoth alone. So that was a huge act of service to him. So yeah, it just depends.
And how do you, well, in the case of the book, it's very obvious, I suppose, but how do you make it known to the spirits that the act that you're doing is an offering to them? Is it something that you say, that you think of?
So a lot of my communication with any of the spirits that I work with is through a meditative trance. And a lot of it is path working and communicating that way. There's also, if there's any times of uncertainty where I'm unsure what to offer, or I'm unsure of if they even accepted my offering, I will sit down and do some divination, because for me, that's what divination is for. It's there to get answers. So I will sit down I have a special glyph set that I have created with my own language of symbols for Thoth specifically. So I will consult that glyph set to see if he's accepting my offering, if that's something that he wants, and it gives me a little bit more clarity that way. I'll also sit down with my tarot cards quite often with the spirits that I work with and have a conversation that way. So it really is divination, through tarot, my glyph set, scrying, so on and so forth to get those answers, or through a meditative state where I am communing with that entity and receiving its divine wisdom. And it will be very, very apparent whether they accept it or whether they don't accept it through my meditations. It's very easy to tell if they're happy with what I'm doing or not. So for me, I don't really have an issue of figuring out if they accepted it or not.
Yeah. And in terms of magic, do you think that magic can accomplish anything, or are there limits to what magic can or cannot do? And how do you define that boundary?
Yeah, I do think that there are limits. I mean, this isn't Hollywood. I don't think I try to be as open-minded as possible, but there are definitely limits. Again, I think that we go back to our conversation on science and how science explains ordinary reality versus magic explaining non-ordinary reality. I don't think that magic can override ordinary reality. I don't think that it can override the laws of physics. And I'm not saying that I'm not open to the laws of physics changing, because again, as a science person myself, I'm open to being wrong. Again, we thought that the earth was flat at some point, and then we found out that it was round. But at the same time, I do think that we are limited with these physical barriers. And this just comes back to critical thinking. I think it's a dance, really. And I talk about this a lot with my subscribers, because I have quite a few people that are actually a little bit more on the rational side, like the really, really critical rational side, and they have a hard time believing in magic. They have a hard time getting themselves to where they need to be in ritual, and they just don't know what to do. They don't know how to overcome their rational critical mind. And I always say that it's a dance. You need the critical rational mind so that we don't get carried away. We're not entering spiritual psychosis. We're not, floating away and not able to stay tethered to this physical vessel. But we need to have a certain level of open-mindedness. So open-mindedness and rational-minded thinking, I think, can work together. So to kind of answer your question, yeah, I do think that magic has limits, but I also think that we need to be open-minded to being wrong.
And in terms of what can magic accomplish as opposed to what can it not accomplish, what do you think? I mean, how do you assess where the limit is? Like, for instance, can magic affect bigger things in our political sphere, or do you think that is not possible? To what is the limit of the agency of magic? I suppose that's my question, in your view, of course. So,
Yeah.
is it just about personal accomplishments? Is it only certain accomplishments but not others? It's the same with healing. I mean, can you heal anything with magic or only certain things? I mean, how do you draw the line between the things that are accomplishable through magic and things that are beyond its possibility? And also, are there ways to increase the agency, in your opinion?
Sure. So to answer your question, there is no line for me, because hear me out. Everything is so subjective. It is not quantifiable. Everything is on a case-by-case basis. So every new situation that is presented to me magically, I want to stay open-minded to the possibility that magic, mysticism, the paranormal can play a part in helping that. But I also want to remain rational and use my critical thinking skills at the same time. So I don't know if I can make any sort of definitive statements as to what magic can or can't do, because I've seen some incredible things happen. I've seen some miracles happen. At the same time, I don't want to say that magic can heal cancer every single time in every single cancer patient, so it really just depends. It's a case-by-case basis. I will say, as a medical intuitive, I did see healing happen in very strange ways that were not explained medically whatsoever. But would I sit here and condone magic to heal someone's serious illness without going to the doctor? No, absolutely not. So it really is a case-by-case basis. To answer your question about the political sphere, this is something that I really struggle with. And I really do try to challenge my thinking and be open-minded as possible. But I really struggle with the idea, can we actually change things in the political sphere magically? I have participated in multiple rituals, and I think it's just a complex, nuanced issue, because let's say that we have a group ritual where we are focusing on calling upon a specific spirit or god to help us achieve something politically, or maybe we're focusing on a specific sigil to achieve something. First of all, I think the number one reason why political spells don't tend to work is because they're disorganized and we don't have the energy all focused collectively towards one goal. It's almost like we have a bunch of little bits of energy kind of firing all over the place chaotically, and there isn't a lot of focus. But I have been part of rituals, really big rituals, where all of us have been focusing our energy and intention into a specific goal. But then we have to also consider, okay, what about practitioners on the other side that may be doing the exact same thing, but in opposite, trying to achieve the exact opposite of what we want. So it's hard to say, whether magic works or doesn't work for something political when we have people on two sides of an issue that are potentially engaging magically. We can't say that, well, just magic doesn't work at all, because what if it is working, but it's being counteracted by the person on the other side? So it's really, really hard to say with political issues. And I've so gone back on this, gone back and forth on this, because I want to engage with the things that I care about, but then also a part of me sometimes wonder if maybe that's a little delusional to think that we have that much power. But then I argue with myself again and say, okay, well, who cares if it's working or not? I'm sitting here doing nothing at the end of the day. I'm sitting here doing nothing. What can I do? So if it doesn't work, oh, well, at least I can get up off my, I'm sorry, I'm not going to swear, but, and do something about it, do some activism around it. So that was a little bit of a monologue on your question.
I think that your thought process is pretty much the same as mine, so that's
Oh,
why I was laughing.
great. Okay, good.
It is complicated. It is definitely a complicated matter, but at the same time, you think, should I just sit to do nothing? I recently made a couple of videos on. There's one that I will make next month on Magic for Peace, and I did one about more magic and the historical cases where magic has been used in times of war, and as well as and also I did a practical one that was more focused on the practice and trying to understand what can and cannot be accomplished with magic. So it is a topic that it is on my mind in this specific time for whatever reason, but it's really complicated. So I suppose that in my case, I try to make those videos as an offering somehow. It's like if you can help anybody to do something, maybe that will be worth it. But it's complicated. But I suppose that one of the people that I admire, that I really admire in the area is Dion Fortune and what she did during the Second World War with the Magical Battle of Britain. It's like I really love reading that book because you have like the events that are occurring and then the type of meditation visualization that she was sending via the newsletter to people, and I thought that is so lovely. Also the way that she talks about the Nazis, saying, oh, we shouldn't hate them or hurt them because they are also people, and it's like I don't know, I just found her approach so heartening. So well, we don't know if it worked or if history would have panned out that way anyway, but I like to think that it worked what she did.
I like to think that it worked too. And it's so tough because I feel like I've always been a bleeding heart, for literally anything. And I end up consuming myself in media that is to an unhealthy amount. And so I need to take action. I need to do something. I need to do some sort of activism for the things that I care about. And at the end of the day, who cares if it's working or not? I mean, I do care. I do want it to work. Okay. I want to be very clear. I do actually care, but I'd rather at least try to engage in something because maybe there's a chance that it does work and it does do something. And I'd rather do maybe a little bit of something than nothing at all.
Yeah. I suppose that we can wrap up on this hopeful note.
Yeah, very hopeful. I guess. What a depressing end to our conference. No, just kidding.
So where can people find you?
Oh, sure. So I'm Ivy Corvus on YouTube, or Ivy the Occultist, and you can find my work. I recently, this last July, I was published in a book with Peter Carroll. So Peter Carroll, for those that don't know, is credited as one of the official founders of Chaos Magic. So there is a Chaos Magic anthology called This is Chaos, and my essay on thread theory, which is a completely different subject that we did not discuss today, and that's totally fine. But if you're interested in reading that, it is in that book. I also have my first solo book coming out next February. It's just a very short introductory to chaos magic. It's called Chaos Magic, A Complete Beginner's Guide. And it's really an updated look on where chaos magic has been and where it is now, and taking someone from the absolute beginner and taking them through learning about gnosis and how to enter a Gnostic state, teaching them about sigils and hypersigils and servitors and pop culture magic, and learning about deconditioning your mind and paradigm shifting and conversations about objective versus subjective reality. So it really is meant for the absolute beginner. But again, it's very short, only 136 pages long, very short bite-sized guide. It's part of the Pagan Portal series, and they have a bunch of really short books that kind of introduce you to various topics. And they had asked me to write the one for chaos magic. So you can find me there. But otherwise, I'm just on YouTube posting whatever I want. I've gotten to this point where I really just don't care about the algorithm. I know exactly what kind of videos I could be posting to get tons of views, and I don't want to do those videos. So I'm not going to. So I'm just going to post the videos that I like from my practitioner perspective of whatever I'm messing around with currently, as well as interviewing people such as yourself. So yeah, I think those are all my plugs. I don't know.
Is there anything that you wanted to share that I didn't ask or didn't touch on?
Ooh, I don't think so. Be curious and be kind. That's always what I say to people. That's it. That's my final message.
Okay, so thank you so much, Ivy, for being here with us, and thank you all guys for listening to this conversation. And don't forget to go and check Ivy's channel and subscribe to it. I also find that your channel is very interesting and informative. So, and if you like this video, don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and activate the notification bell. And as you know, this project is sustained by you. So if you have the means, I would really appreciate it if you consider joining my Patreon community or sending donations on PayPal, Coffee. There's YouTube membership, super thanks. All the options are in the info box, in bio, in a pinned comment, everywhere. So thank you all so much for considering. And I hope that you all stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now.